COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of mental health as a critical and missing element in an organization's people strategy. Mental health and holistic well-being need to go together. In our ongoing research, which is the largest such study in India and has covered more than 5,000 working professionals till now, we are finding data-backed evidence of what we were hearing on the ground in the form of anecdotes. Burnout, stress, anxiety, depression have increased, but we are also seeing that negative coping mechanisms have increased, even leading to increase in substance abuse. We are also seeing numeric evidence of reduction in cognitive skills such as decision-making, problem-solving, innovation, etc. in the workforce. To reduce stress, increase happiness, and achieve peak performance, organizations need to focus on mental health holistically. Organizations of the future will need to establish an end-to-end modular ecosystem for mental health to reduce stress, increase happiness, and help people operate at their peak potential. There are three main challenges to it. Currently in the market, less than 2% of the solutions use clinically proven or evidence-based methods. So how do you implement robust outcome-oriented solutions? We now know that traditional employee assistance programs and large-scale workshop solutions have seen an uptake of only around 2 to 3% by the workforce. So after implementing, how do you get the solution adopted by the employees? What are those engagement methods? And number three, different employees are at different places on the mental health and well-being continuum. Some may need curative while some may need preventive solutions for the same impact of reduction in stress, more happiness, and peak performance. The need of the hour, as per us, is to work on increasing the psychological capital for all employees, but personalizing the efforts based on where they are. At Tatsam, we have created a framework which solves for these issues. We have developed objective metrics for organizations such as Performance and Growth Index, Happiness Index, Social Wellbeing Index, and Overall Psychological Capital Index. Once they are measured and we know where the organization stands, solutions or programs are personalized for each individual and executed using what we call a persuasive systems design model. This strategy has resulted in 20 times more engagement and impact than the traditional solutions which have been used till now by most of the organizations. Tatsam improves mental health for everyone by creating personalized and holistic plans targeting their cognitive, behavioral, emotional, and personal functioning. Our solution has been created by our competent behavioral health team comprising of senior care providers and researchers. The unique proposition that we have for the organizations comprises of personalized plans which comprise of both Eastern and Western well-being regimens, having a holistic focus on cognitive, emotional, and physical dimensions, persuasive systems designed to optimize engagement, and number four, full visibility to the outcomes for both the employees as well as the organizations.
Good afternoon. I'm Blair Campbell, the Head of Industry Development for Fit Summit, and I'm joined here today by Andrea Lomas, the Group Head for Spa Operations of Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, Duncan Young, the Head for Workplace Health and Wellbeing at Lendlease, Gary Blowers, the Founder and CEO of LVL Wellbeing, and Rashmi Sharma, the Global Learning and Wellbeing Lead for Unilever Southeast Asia and Australia, New Zealand at Unilever. I'd like to welcome you all to this panel, and today we'll be discussing the employee health and wellbeing through and beyond COVID. Where must employers now invest? To kick off this panel and begin, the first question I'd like to pose is, has the pandemic permanently advanced, one, the priority of, and two, the investment in employee health and well-being? And firstly, I'd like to come to Andrea.
Well, we've been running at Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group since 2015, a colleague wellness program. So as soon as the pandemic hit, we started where we normally would have tips and tricks, usually a couple of times a week. We do various events. We started on something every day. And this was through the pandemic when we had a lot of people who were working from home or on furlough as well. What we did as well with that is we really sort of rapidly increased. We developed a course actually on inner strength, outer strength, which you may have heard of prior to this, because we did a lot of marketing about that, and that was purely dedicated for our colleagues. And this has just been, really, I would say, was always at the forefront as a priority for our hotel group. But since the pandemic, it's become even more vitally important. We definitely have seen a lot more of our colleagues attend these events. We also have a fully dedicated site, and we have many more activities during the month. So we have a regular monthly array of activities, and together also with our corporate wellness newsletter as well. So it's been, yes, it was always a big priority for us as soon as we started in 2015, but we've now moved this to even more rapidly. However, because our hotels are now operating, it's had to be slightly adjusted because, people are not on furlough. I'm pleased to say, that many of our hotels are getting back to business. But it's still, again, a huge priority because there's a lot of stress out there, because in particular for our industry, we have less colleagues maybe working on shifts, causing a lot more challenges for our colleagues to be able to deal with that. So we are looking at that and developing slightly different types of programs more related to stress management as well.
Thank you, Andrea. Now we'll come to another leading lady of Wellbeing, and that is Rashmi. If we could have your input on this, please.
Sure, Blair. Thanks for having me. Really good to join this discussion. Unilever has been investing in health and well-being quite some time before pandemic. So in that sense, we had the infrastructure, the investment already in place, which really helped us respond fast to pandemic. What I think has improved is the leadership buy-in and the way we give attention to this in a corporate environment. So earlier, let's say if if we start with an initiative, we had to sort of influence leaders to share more, talk about well-being, and really give that time to well-being. Now, a lot of times, a lot of these initiatives are initiated by, business leaders because they get it now and they are able to make time for it much more easily than they were. So as an organization, I would say our investment and priority has always been there. Maybe investment has increased a bit, but I think the biggest shift I see is in the way leadership has started giving it attention.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Rashmi. We're now going to come to the gents. So Duncan, you first and then Gary after.
Hey there. Yes, Duncan Young, Head of Health and Wellbeing for Lendlease. The pandemic obviously has changed the way we live and work. And so I think all of us appreciate the fact that we've got more autonomy, choice over our day, often when we're working from home. So we're going to be working to a new, I suppose, work culture where there's the option to do certain parts of work at home and certain parts of work you might do in the office. So how that changes how we look at wellbeing is if you start thinking about the greater purpose of wellbeing and the meaning of what you do at work makes a really big difference in the longer term. So that autonomy, flexibility, meaning, purpose, I think has really been accelerated during the period of the pandemic. And let's not forget that even though there have been some stressful times, there's been a lot of post-traumatic growth. So we know from both the SARS pandemic and recent papers coming from the COVID-19 pandemic that even during intense areas of stress and some anxiety, people have still thrived through that process. So I think the news is not all bad. And I think we start talking about post-traumatic growth. We start talking about bouncing back stronger, anti-fragility. There's lots of things that we have benefited from the acceleration of the wellbeing movement, which I think in the greater piece of engaging more people is really important.
Absolutely, Duncan. Thank you for that. And Gary, now to you.
Yeah, I think a couple of really good points there. Duncan, the wellbeing movement, I think I like that in the corporate world. It's happening. So, we're obviously feeling it at level. And then what Rashmi said as well, the leadership buy-in is so important when it comes to prioritization. We're lucky that we work with a number of global organizations that we have the, leadership who not only support it, but genuinely believe and drive the wellbeing agenda within their organizations. But for me, the prioritization is that it works both ways. So I think we've gone from organizations or corporates kind of, pushing wellbeing programs onto employees to now where employees realize, oh, wellbeing is important. I should take care of myself. I shouldn't just work all day and spend 9 hours on Zoom or, hunch over on a laptop for 12 hours and not get up and not eat, not drink, not take care of myself. So for me, it's definitely now a two-way conversation rather than an organization to employee type monologue. So that's really important. I think the other thing from an advancement perspective, we've really shifted from more conventional, traditional programs. So physical gyms in corporate buildings or, programs that only cater to one specific audience set to now, everything can be digital and data driven because we're all online, we're all using programs online. So we can make better choices as organizations as to how we deliver wellbeing programs that really meet the needs of our employees. Are they suffering from burnout? Are they suffering from, stress, mental health issues? Are they actually struggling from fitness issues? Because there's a lot of, we go from in waves in terms of our focus, but everybody's wellbeing needs a difference. I think that data-driven approach is really, really powerful for organizations going forward.
Thank you, Guy, for your input there. It's great to hear the balance of fitness provisions and wellness provisions at the same time. And I know that our audience will be very keen to contribute to this conversation. So please do feel free to leave your comments in the chat tab as well. Let's move on to our next question. And I'll start, Rashmi, with you on this, but for all the panel, from recent projects, analysis, and research, what types of programs are providing maximum value and engagement, and where, crucially, have they fallen short, and why would that be?
Blair, I feel that, over the last 18 months, this has shifted. So in the earlier part of this whole journey, we saw a lot more traction on awareness programs. So, programs which kind of demystify well-being. What does it really mean? What is mental health? Why should leaders care about it? I think over the last 18 months, we've crossed that bridge. So yes, awareness is the first part, but now largely people understand the importance, why they should care. They've had that time to reflect. They've had experiences which have helped them understand this better. And now we see that we've launched tons of programs, but a couple of them come to my mind now where, we'll be focusing a lot more data analytics based programs. So programs where employees are able to understand where they are, on a continuum of well-being, or programs which are extremely practical and application based, because now they have that desire. They get it. Now they want the tools and things like that. Which earlier in the earlier part, even if you would give them the tools, they were not really there mentally to kind of pick that up. From an organization perspective, I would say the same. So programs which give you a little bit clarity on to where our employees are, how is the, things which have diagnostics, assessments, able to tell us where have we moved from point A to point B. I think from leaders, from employees, and from HR perspective, those programs will see a lot more engagement now onwards.
Wonderful point. It's great to hear you highlight not only has technology ramped up and the offerings, but also the uptake, both from the consumers, the workforce, but also from the employers themselves. Duncan, would you care to add to this question next?
Yeah, when we look at wellbeing, I think we've got to remember that it's about reducing ill-being and promoting well-being. So we all know that mental health, for example, is a continuum. at one end, Mental Health First Aid. We've just run more than 1,000 people through that program that help identify early incidents of poor mental health, right the way through to the programs that I run, which are called appreciative inquiry, so positive psychology programs that ask people to reflect on the best things that have happened in their life. What were the best things that happened during lockdown? What did you develop? What did you learn about yourself? So I think with this really broadness of a continuum, we need to reflect that everyone's in a different part of the journey. I think where we've missed out in some respects is when I run programs, the secret to longevity and living an amazing life is shared between people, and that observational learning is not as easy when it's all done remotely. So I think not having people coming together. And the other thing that if I was to reflect on, I think anecdotally that we've had a reduction in movement because our routines have changed. So we talk about high intensity incidental movement. So I might have got that riding my push bike to the ferry to the city, and then push bike to work. With those routines changing, I'm lucky because I swim every morning, but for many people, they've substituted that with either extra sleep or something else. So when our routines changed, our movement changed, and I don't think everyone's got to grips with a Zoom meeting could be done on the move, or a Zoom meeting needs a 5-minute break for everyone to do a bit of exercise to get the blood flowing again. So again, I think we're still in a transition mode. I think amazing things will happen. Learnings will happen from this pandemic, both good and bad. And hopefully we can take all the good things forward.
Thank you, Duncan. It's really great to see Lendlease employing those first stage strategies, and then also the later more inquisitive, positive psychology feedback, so that everyone is mapped out along that whole journey. Gary, could I come to you next just on the expansion of this?
Yeah, I think totally agree with the points that have been made so far. I think, again, for me, data is so important here. So you can build responsive programs if you have data. If you don't have that data, you don't know what you're building, and you don't know who you're engaging, and you don't know the needs of your employees or your customers or whoever you're trying to support the well-being of. So that data-driven approach is so important to continue to be responsive, because, as Rashmi has said, the needs of the employees change quite rapidly over time. So you have to stay, on top of those needs and ahead of them. So that data-driven approach is so important. And again, the thing that we've seen, or two things. One, team-based approach to well-being drives higher engagement almost every time. Whether it's accountability, that social connectedness that's been lost because of various lockdowns, just seeing friendly faces or having a bit of high-spirited competition. So that team-based activity or programs are so valuable, driving longer-term engagement. And then finally, and we talked about different locations, but here in Dubai, we are seeing now that the hybrid approach is really driving engagement even further. So having a digital plus physical combination of well-being activities, engagement spikes by 10, 12, 15x. So, we're lucky that we're in the position where we can start to experiment again with physical activities, well-being activities, meditation, sound journeys, yoga, Pilates, anything across the well-being spectrum, and see how that digital physical continuum can support overall engagement. So hopefully everybody gets the opportunity to start, playing with that mode of engagement again in the future. But I can already tell you that it works very, very well.
Thank you, Gary. And then lastly, Andrea, to you, same question.
Well, what happened for us in the pandemic, we developed this course that I mentioned earlier, which was the Inner Strength, Outer Strength, and that was based on the principles of vitality. So it was all about movement and also nutrition and nourishment of the body. And then at the same time, there was a whole program on mindfulness. Now, all of this was pre-recorded actually and put on a whole course platform, and together with really sort of like looking at your inner self, so authenticity, we call it. So it's all based on the principles of positive psychology that Duncan, you were mentioning as well. So again, people got to sort of really inquire on what were their strengths, etc., and where were they heading, because a lot of the time during the pandemic, people have had time to take some time and reflect. And that was a very, very busy course. We had a lot of sign-ups. We've run a number of different courses. However, recently that has actually tailored off, so we haven't had as much sort of engagement in the course, and we've just quite recently just finished it for October for Mental Health Month. What we have found has really taken off is the live events. I was running a course last week. Again, it was about sort of really looking at the 5 elements in traditional Chinese medicine. And I expected maybe there'd be a few people there, but it was actually, we had it in the hundreds actually, because people were again inquisitive and really wondering like, what is going on with my body? And, getting to that level of like really looking within, and not just about fitness and but more sort of on a positive psychology perspective as well, because I think of the reflection that we've seen. At the same time, if we do the shorter live events, which are 10-15 minute meditations, we also see that those are a good uptake as well. But I do agree that people are wanting the in-person now. They've actually been a bit zoomed out or go-to meetinged out. So they're looking, when we do run, sort of the regular live events, we do find that we have a good turnout. And most definitely for us is mental well-being as well. That has really come out with meditation and mindfulness. And that is something that is really, again, growing very much so.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea. I think our audience is going to be very excited to hear from Unilever, from Lendlease, from LVL Wellbeing, and from Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, all the various programs and initiatives you're running now and what you're going to be doing in the future. So hopefully we'll circle back in this discussion in 6 months' time or a year's time and see how things are even further developing for all of you. For the next question, I'd like to ask you all, is mental health still the elephant in the room? And Duncan, I'll come to you first on this, and then we'll go to Gary.
Look, without a doubt, society-wide, that incidents of mental ill health have increased during the pandemic. But again, just to reiterate, even during times of high stress, there's still a large amount of post-traumatic growth. So we've got to go either side. I think with all of these, when we talk about well-being, we've got to think about the environment that we create, the physical environment, which we can't really influence because people won't come to the office, the digital environment. So we have, for example, 30-day challenges. So every day you get a piece you can read. So it might be about gratitude, or it might be the benefits of talking to strangers. These are these micro learning opportunities. And then, so that kind of mental health and staying in touch with people. And if you've got good leaders, obviously, to feel belonging, we know the definition of loneliness is not being understood or not felt you belong to something. And leaders play a big part. We're very lucky at Lendlease that we can form these teams and feel part of something that's greater, whether that's part of our job or just part of the teams that we're in. So definitely it has increased, but I think we've also come up with some really innovative way to keep the engagement happening with our teams. As I say, all the way from mental health first aid at one end through to appreciative inquiry and 30-day challenges and podcasts that we're bringing live into people's homes. So it's been good all around, and a real learning opportunity for all of us about how we engage better with not only the people in our organisations, but all the clients that we deal with as well.
Thank you, Duncan. You're absolutely right, Duncan, that people have had to innovate and they've had to change their paths and develop new ways of engaging. And I think, Gary, you've done some work on this as well. So I'll come to you next on some more details regarding that.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say it's an elephant in the room anymore. I think people are more and more open-minded, open to talk about it. And I would say a lot more people are open to actively seeking help, which is good. That's where we need to be. I think one of the things I would point out, and this is just an observation from our side, is that, again, there tends to be an over-focus on certain elements of well-being, and then to the neglect of other areas. And everybody's well-being is the whole person, not just their mental well-being or their physical well-being. So there's that constant balance that we have to strike by not overemphasizing the sole importance of mental health, because if you don't have physical well-being or social well-being or any of the other pillars intact, then you're not the best you can be. So I think that's something that we try to balance out. It's not that we try and swim against, it's just say, right, how do we not overemphasize that this particular aspect is more important than the other? Because in our opinion, that's not the case. That said, on our entire platform, and we have, hundreds, if not thousands of different activities that our members can do live or on demand, as Andrea was saying. The number one most engaged live session in the last few weeks has been on managing the signs of burnout. So, Zoom fatigue or go-to-meeting fatigue is real. Burnout is happening. And I think encouragingly, more and more people are being alert to that fact or aware to that fact and starting to do something about it. Too many people are still burning out. So that is an issue that we're all actively trying to solve. But I think if you'd have gone back 2, 3, 5 years ago, no one would have talked about it. Everybody would have crashed and burnt out. And then everybody would have suffered the consequences, both yourself as the person that has, suffered from burnout, and then all of those around you picking up extra work and family and friends and whatnot. So I think the conscious awareness is increasing. People, I think the good thing is with Zoom and the way we work now is people are more willing to demonstrate vulnerability as well. So, we have live art therapy sessions for anxiety or stress, or live sessions to help people manage the signs of burnout. And it is amazing how people from all over the world who don't know each other open up. And that's, one of the really beautiful things we've seen from, the pandemic and our platform as well. It's just how we can help each other understand or, support each other through different stages of their well-being. So no, my stance is no, it's not an elephant in the room anymore. It's still an issue that we have to actively address, but we shouldn't overemphasize it or kind of single it out as an aspect of more importance. Every aspect of each individual's well-being is important.
Excellent point, Gary, to consider everything as a whole. Let's jump now to Andrea for your input on this.
Totally agree with you, Gary, on that. It is no longer an elephant in the room, I would say. I think it's something that people are a lot more aware of and also willing to admit that maybe they're having challenges. We just certified actually earlier this year, every property has a mental health first aider, which I know you mentioned as well, Duncan. We just gone through another certification last week. So we're really focused on this. We've also just developed a site which is linked to our colleague wellness site, but it's purely focused on mental well-being. And the focus of that is, because I agree, Gary, it's all within, sort of our overall well-being. But with this particular was to really focus on maybe the people that are having a few challenges with mental well-being themselves. They're a little bit unsure and they're also worried about the stigma around this. So we have a whole sort of site which talks about the stigma and really to help people sort of, break this down and build up the awareness. Now, October for us was Mental Health Month, which we had a lot of activities which was focused around that. And again, like you said, Gary, it's been wonderful to see people where they're saying, yes, I am struggling. I am at point of burnout, I need some support. So that again is where we have our mental health first aiders who, we've done a whole series of to promote them on our intranet, where they're there for our colleagues, because we've just quite recently done our colleague engagement survey to really look at where our colleagues are at. But we do know and we can feel the fact that many people, and again, it's globally, it's everybody that are at burnout. And we're really looking now to start to think, okay, what are we doing to really support our colleagues? And again, this mental well-being has been vitally important for us. And again, very exciting because we're developing more and more tools for this. We're also looking at the way we communicate as a group because, we're a 24/7 company, so basically, we're in very different time zones because of the fact many people can't travel. We're always, particularly in Asia, we're always on early morning calls and late night calls. individuals. Now that can take its toll on somebody as well, so we're looking at that, and we're working on a program which we call the Communication Charter. So this builds in emails and everything that we communicate, and I'm heading that up as well within our with our Chief Operating Officer from HR, and this is something that again is linked to the overall mental well-being of our colleagues as well.
Thank you, Andrea. It's a lot of exciting.
Can I just add something to that, Blair? So a couple of points, and sorry to interrupt, but this is important. Organizational culture is so important. So what Andrea was just saying, tools exist on Outlook or Gmail where you can delay the sending of an email until 8 a.m. the next morning, that person's time, wherever they are. So, we should use these tools to give each other a chance. So that, that culture point is so important, and something that we should all be actively thinking of. I think the second point is, despite what I said, I'm going to contradict myself. Too many people still suffer in silence on the mental health side of things. So it's all well and good me saying it's not an elephant in the room, because it's not. I'm happy to talk about it. All of us are happy to talk about it. So in this room, it's certainly not an elephant, but too many people still suffer in silence. I think that's where we've got to do the work still, to help those people feel comfortable to find someone to talk to, or, just be able to open up, because when we get them, those people to that point, that's when our job is done. So, yeah, there's two sides to every story, and I've just told both of mine.
Let's go to Rashmi for your input on this and your comments.
So I've been listening to everybody's inputs and, maybe reconsidering what I feel. But I do think it's still the elephant in the room. Yes, is it better than what it was 18 months back? For sure. People are not uncomfortable hearing the term mental health, but do they really understand what mental health is? Because mental health as a term has also been tainted because you only look at the extremes. You look at extreme cases of depression, suicide, and then it gets associated with that. And this year, the theme for WHO or World International Mental Health Day was everyone has mental health, which I think is the exact message which we need to kind of dive down into, because everybody has mental health. I wouldn't say everybody's still comfortable together to talk about it. I mean, I would say even in this room, we can talk about mental health as long as it's somebody else's mental health. But I'm not sure if we're able to, maybe talk freely about our own mental health. So I would say that it's getting better. It's still there. And I think from a regional perspective in Southeast Asia, the cultural beliefs also play a role in it. Because there is a culture, there is a very extremely strong culture apart from ANZ in this part of the region about saving face. So that does that does not encourage people to talk about it so freely. So yeah, that's what I've observed.
Excellent points from all the panelists there. And I think there's no doubt about it. Mental health does need to be talked about more, but it is much more uptake as a topic than ever before. And I think everyone has nailed the point across there. Let's go to our third question, which I want to ask each of you. With increasingly remote and hybridized workforces, should employers lean more on technology or human connection for optimal employee health and well-being, and where does the right balance lie? And let's start off coming back to Gary on this.
The answer is very simple in both. We can't operate without technology in anything. And not only that, if we choose to, we generate very valuable data. And from that, we can continue to grow our program. So that's a given. But again, as I said, we are human beings. We've been disconnected for far too long. And I think that the value that, we talk a lot about physical well-being, we talk a lot about mental well-being, but we often forget to talk about social well-being. And we always think that might just be going to the pub or whatever, but it's not. It's just human interaction. Just being around other humans does something for us. And I think, that physical connectedness, that social interaction is so important in driving overall well-being. So is it the same as what it was in 2019 or before? No, it's probably not. But when it's possible, when restrictions are lifted, if you implement some form of hybrid program where you engage people physically as well as digitally, I'm confident that you will see a much greater uptake and much greater engagement level over time, because people need to interact with other people. So yeah, very, very simple, and absolutely, yes, you need both from my side.
Thank you, Gary. That's great to hear. Andrea, perhaps you'd like to chime in on this now?
Yes, I mean, I think for us, it's definitely been the human connection is what people are looking for now. We're definitely finding anything that's maybe pre-recorded, they're not as much uptake, and we can look at that sort of on our data. But if it's live events, and even if it's done virtually, because again, it will depend whether people are in the offices or not in the offices or in the hotels, then again, but as long as it's live, then they definitely attend. The in-person event, though, also we're finding does get a lot of uptakes. I mean, now we're back in Hong Kong, we're doing a number of our programs, and we're back in the office, real time. We just ran a program the other day, which was a spin sort of action, which was actually for Mind Hong Kong. So all based on mental well-being on Friday. And there was a lot of corporate companies there, and it was all live, all sort of controlled because of COVID. But again, the uptake also from our colleagues here was tremendous at corporate office, and the buzz around, because people just want to be with people. So I think wherever possible, if you can do live in-person events, then absolutely. But if not possible, then I would suggest try to go more for live virtual events. So again, it's that real-time connection with another human being, because again, the loneliness of what has been brought on since COVID is very, very real. And again, that all relates back to people's mental health. So they want to also have that connection as well with a human being.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrea. Duncan, I'll come to you next, because I know that you've been one of these victims of being stuck away from the office and being at home for a long time. So you know how remote workers might feel. So what was your reflection on this?
Look, I think it's interesting just to reflect on, we're talking about company well-being, the well-being that our companies provide. And if you go back to the Latin roots, companies mean to literally break bread. It comes from the Latin term. So we have a strong bond with all of us, and we know we're better together. Robert Putnam and everyone writes about this. But increasingly, we're breaking down, not even just in the pandemic, but before that. But I think the combination, if you go back to Gary, was totally right, in that we need a combination of both. So, I talk about the 30-day challenge, the daily emails you get. I talk about the podcast, but the secret sauce comes when you bring everyone together in a coaching scenario. And I think we need to be asking more of this kind of question. So I'm talking about radical flourishing, not just good well-being. I want people to live the best possible lives they can live. What do you need as an employee for you to thrive and do your best job? And for some people, working from home is awesome. I know, having pretty much worked the last year from home, that I've developed a whole podcast series. I've written 45 blogs. There's no way I could have done that in the office. So my career has actually flourished as a result. I know that through Julian Sandstrom, one of the persons I interviewed for a podcast, if you engage with your local barista, you're 17% more likely to be happy. So again, walking up to my local cafe, being engaged in my local environment has been amazing to basically reconfirm to me what a wonderful society we live in. So I think there's a real mixture of both. I've missed seeing my work colleagues, learning observationally and talking to live audiences, but there's also been this amazing thing about working from home. We know that productivity's increased, but that's largely probably because people are working longer hours. But again, I think we've just got to look for the good things that have worked in both scenarios, in person and of course virtually, and take the best of those forward. And I can't wait to see what the new future looks like. I'm hoping we're not just going straight back to a 2019 world. I think we've learned so much about ourselves and what makes us happy in both life and work, and hopefully we'll take all those things forward.
Succinctly put, Duncan, there. That was great. Rashmi, I'll come to you for the closing remarks on this last question.
So I think just to close, just for the closing remarks, I would say use technology to scale human connection.
Excellent. That's very, very astutely put. It's a real challenge, obviously, to meet the human connection and at the same time meet the remote audiences and hybrid workforces. So thank you all for those comments. In closing, let's ask you one final question each. And that is, in closing, do we go big or do we go home? Where can or where must employers invest more to design and perhaps offer effective long-term health and well-being strategies? And Rashmi, let's come to you first for this.
I would say that be cognizant of the life stage and the generation we are talking to. I would say for people who are, let's say, and I'm generalizing hugely here, but you get the broad drift that people who are above 30, 35, we need to invest a lot more in education and mindset shifts because they grew up not in the digital native world, and the information was still, a lot of their cultural beliefs are shaped by physical environments a lot more than the younger generation. And for younger generation, the younger millennials, Zennials, and whatever the next generation is, a lot more on technological infrastructure to scale the tools and personalized support for enabling them.
Sorry, thank you. Let's go to you, Duncan, for this question as well, following from Rashmi's comments.
Okay, so when it comes to well-being, we're not just talking about the management of ill health, we're talking about the promotion of well-being, and we're talking radical flourishing here. So overall well-being needs to be career well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, community well-being. Have you got purpose and meaning in your life? So let's look at all these 5 areas. We need to shape as businesses the environments to help people flourish. That's the physical environment, the virtual environment, the social environment. I think we're doing a great job to help people flourish now and into the future. But that doesn't mean we don't need to keep on asking the questions, what can we do today to help you be the best version of yourself? And that questioning and providing new programs will be how people will be the best versions of themselves.
Thank you, Duncan. Gary, let's come to you next.
So from an organizational perspective, I think, we have to face the facts or the reality in that we're never going to engage every employee. The numbers just tell us that, too many times. So the goal first should be how do we engage more people? And I think from our perspective, it's again, staying progressive. So not just offering the same program year after year, but using data to continue to evolve the content offerings or the topics, or going from on demand to live to in person, or then creating a hybrid environment. So yeah, we have to keep trying. We have to keep valuing and putting the health and well-being of employees at the top of the list. I don't think that's going to go away, which is good. So I think that's one thing we can be grateful for, is that we've brought well-being to the very top of most organizations' agendas, if not all. And then, just continue to progress based on data, based on our learnings, and how we keep employees engaged on the topic of their overall well-being.
Fantastic comment so far. Lastly, Andrea, let's come to you.
Well, I think we should go big. I really do, because I think that this, COVID has been such an exciting time for us as an industry, where people have really had time to reflect and really understand that what we do as an industry and what is well-being to them. I do think, though, that it's also time for HR, the HR divisions to really take this on board as well. And the way that we do it, we have a mix between our spa and wellness teams together with our HR teams and together with our food and beverage teams to put together the colleague wellness programs. At corporate offices, what we have is we have a colleague wellness committee, and that they organize everything. So I think, again, in order to go big, you also need to have the collaboration of the colleagues, and what we try to do is get from every department, so everybody has that sense of, that voice within that department, so that they can, promote well-being. And I agree with Gary, you're not necessarily going to, reach everybody, but I do believe that there's something for everybody. I also think, that it's also good if you have the money to be able to invest in a small little well-being room. Like, we had quite a small space here at corporate office, but what we did, we put a little massage chair in there. We have that down where we're focusing really on the 5 senses. We have vaporizers in there. So this gives, again, where colleagues can go in and have a little nap at lunchtime. They can have a little massage. We've also done little head and toe massages and things like that. So I think if you've got, looking at that, it's a small investment, but it makes such a difference as well to colleagues. And I think at this time, we do need to go big, because it really is the way of the future. I think the younger generation are so much more aware of this. And I agree, Rashmi, with what you were saying, the different generations of what, sort of maybe the older generations prefer to be having live events, where maybe the younger generations prefer to have everything on hand on their phone, so I think, again, it's something, but it is a really important component. And I think for people's well-being as industries, we really need to focus on this as well. And that will help us in our continued and really the way forward for talent acquisition, which is such an important component, because we are in an industry that's frontline. And I know we have been very challenged also with that. So how are we going to get that talent? We've got to show them that we care and that we live and breathe well-being in our organization.
Thank you, everyone, for all the changes and all the comments you have certainly highlighted here. Just in final conclusion to everything, I'd like to go with a 30-second answer from each of you on what excites you most for the future. So Rashmi did such a good job in being very concise earlier. Let's come to you. What is the thing that really excites you most?
Well-being going mainstream, and people talking about holistic well-being and not like physical well-being or mental well-being, as Gary was sharing earlier.
Thank you very kindly. Gary, you next.
So just building on Andrea's point earlier, the thing that excites us now, based on the experiments we've run here in Dubai, is seeing how the hybrid well-being approach, so digital and physical, in corporate offices or corporate buildings or hotels, can really multiply engagement 10, 12, 15-fold. So as organizations come back to work, bringing their digital well-being programs with them, but creating purpose-built environments for their employees to really take care of themselves and do sessions together on a social basis as well.
Thank you, Gary, very much for that. Duncan, what about you?
So in closing, I'm saying I'm optimistic for the future, and I'm hoping that we're going to leverage the interests that people have in their overall health and well-being. Again, not just being less sick, but having radical well-being or flourishing. We want to elevate that game if we can, and we want to start thinking about all the things that happen on the edges, the optimism. And there are so many great things yet to be explored, like nutritional psychiatry to help with mental health, how movement might help our mood. All these things, once we start combining them, will really lead to some great things in the future.
Thank you, Duncan. And lastly, Andrea, what excites you most?
I think it's, again, very similar to what Duncan was saying, is about, combining all the elements of wellness, or as we say, the dimensions of wellness, from movement to stillness, etc. But it's also, reaching many people. So what we have found, that as we reach our colleagues, we're also reaching their families. So again, it's really helping people on a much broader scale. And I think, with that level of awareness and people looking at wellness nowadays, I think it's only going to get much broader, and we're going to reach more people. And really, again, overall focus is really to help people in their lives, and then to help them live better lives for themselves and for their families as well.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And thank you to all of the panel so far for all your incredible input. It was wonderfully insightful. We fully appreciate all the expert knowledge that you've shared here. It's an absolute honour to hear all of your contributions thus far. From myself, from the Fit Summit team, we'd like to thank Andrea, we'd like to thank Rashmi, we'd like to thank Duncan and Gary for all their assistance in making this come possible. And we'd like to thank, obviously, the audience for listening and sharing your thoughts on the chat. And it's goodbye, everyone, from all of us. And we hope to see you either in Singapore tomorrow or perhaps at our epic event in June 2022. So thank you, everyone. It's over and out from all of us.